Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents, the Australia Institute podcast where we're talking about just what the hell is going on in the economy. I'm Elinor Johnston-Leek, the senior content producer here at the Australia Institute, and back again this week because he's still much better, our chief economist, Greg Jericho. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Elinor. 2 weeks in a row.
2 weeks in a row. I know.
Smashing it.
I'm glad you're still feeling all right, although still a little bit of a tickle in the throat.
Yeah, just can't get rid of it, but probably due to Canberra's glorious winter weather where it's barely getting above 10.
Yeah.
Today's a nice day, though.
Yeah, it could have been worse. Yeah. Greg, we've got some new inflation figures out, and while you were away, we did get a bit of an opportunity to dunk on the RBA, which I feel a little bit bad that you missed out on. But something tells me that you might have another opportunity today.
The last RBA meeting was a shock. The next one looks like a lock. The latest inflation data heading in the right direction.
The quarterly inflation rate has fallen from 2.4% to 2.1%. That remains within the RBA's target range of 2 to 3%.
Both underlying and headline inflation in the Reserve Bank's target band, headline inflation at the very bottom of the band. Monthly inflation is below the Reserve Bank's target band. It actually has a 1 in front of it.
Unfortunately, the higher prices will stay. They just won't grow as they have. It also shows the Reserve Bank's reluctance to cut rates out of caution a few weeks ago was unnecessary. The government and RBA have been working to improve monthly data so they don't have situations like this where timing dictates rates. It should mean the same cautious mistakes don't happen again.
Look, the inflation figures showed that in the year to June, inflation across the country rose 2.1%, which always remember the Reserve Bank is targeting anywhere between 2 and 3%. So if it goes above 3%, it gets worried. If it goes below 2%, it should get worried. And we're getting really
closer to the lower end of that, yeah.
Yeah, and what the figures really show, though, is ironically, because the Reserve Bank actually predicted in its statement on monetary policy in May that inflation would be 2.1% at this time. So they got the prediction right, but
they didn't
act on
factor that into their decision.
They still
when they kept interest rates on hold, to be clear.
And it's not just that it's 2.1%, which is pretty low, and you think if inflation is really slowing, that the Reserve Bank should be cutting rates to try, because a slowing inflation rate essentially means that there's not a lot of activity in the economy, that things are pretty depressed. People aren't out there spending madly, and certainly wages aren't rising strongly. So that's generally when you cut interest rates and you think, okay, 2.1%, that's still within the target range. But when you break down the figures by capital city, and always remember, inflation only measures inflation in capital cities. It doesn't measure inflation in country towns or regional hubs or anything like that. It's only those capital cities. But when you look at the figures there, in 5 of the capital cities, inflation was actually below 2%.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In Darwin, it was 1.6, Canberra 1.6, Hobart 1.7, Adelaide 1.8, Sydney 1.9. Now, Melbourne was right bang on 2%. The only places that were above 2% were Brisbane and Perth. Brisbane had 2.5 and Perth had 2.7. You think, okay, that's weird. And it is kind of weird. And the only reason Brisbane and Perth had inflation that high was because their state-based energy rebates were ending.
Oh, okay.
And that kind of artificially increased electricity prices because the rebate ended. So like you had in Perth, the price of electricity in the June quarter alone, jumping around 110% or something around there. A massive jump. And that abnormally lifted their inflation. So if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for the end of those state-based rebates, they would have been lower, which means that overall inflation across Australia would have been lower and probably below 2%.
The target rate, yeah.
Yeah, and if we look at the actual monthly indicator, because the official CPI, the official inflation is a quarterly, a 3-monthly thing for now, but the Bureau of Stats also does a monthly measure, And from November, the monthly measure is going to become the official measure. So
Oh,
every
okay.
month we're going to have an official
every
CPI.
month we get to talk about this.
But that monthly measure, which at the moment still leaves out a few things, it's got about 2/3 of what the official measure has in it. That monthly figure had Australia's inflation at 1.9%.
Oh,
so
wow.
we're talking everything is saying, what the hell, RBA?
Yeah.
Cut the rates, cut the friggin' rates. And yet they kind of were predicting this. They kind of knew this was going to happen.
But they went.
But we need to be a bit more sure.
Yeah. When are they meeting next?
Yeah, they meet 12th of August.
Okay.
That's when we'll find out.
It's coming up.
It's coming up, 2 weeks?
Something like that.
Yeah. The recap, inflation falling.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you look at the core measure of inflation, which in Australia we use a thing called the trimmed mean, what that means is each quarter they trim or basically exclude the top 15% and bottom 15% price changes. So the biggest 15% increases and the biggest 15% falls, or the smallest 15% rises if everything's going up. They cut those out to kind of just get the middle part.
Is that just to sort of exclude the outliers, I guess?
Yeah, that's basically it. It's done because there might be occasion of something like electricity. A rebate is going off or a rebate comes on. Also sometimes, education prices. We find that generally in the March quarter, they zoom up and then they don't do anything for the rest of the year because it's the start of the school year.
Oh,
and,
that makes sense.
They basically stay the same. And so generally it's like, well, we know that's bouncing up. Let's sort of exclude it. And so it gives a bit more of a steady view of things. Now, it's important to note the RBA, while it looks at that core inflation measure to give it a bit of a guide of where things are at, it does actually target CPI in its sort of mandate is to target that official CPI, which is 2.1%. So there'll be people saying, oh, the underlying inflation is 2.7%. That's okay. It's like, yeah, but that kind of is excluding a lot of things that we are paying for, and it's excluding a bit of the story. So and also that is falling as well. So we've got that happening, inflation coming down. And what we have with unemployment, it's going up.
Yep.
So when you got inflation falling and getting to nearly below the target range,
or
you got
below the target range.
Or below the target range in 5 cities.
Yep.
Unemployment's rising above 4%, where it's been for a long time. We'd like to keep it at either that or below it. When you combine those, it's like Reserve Bank cut rates. It's a no-brainer. And so if they don't in 2 weeks' time, I'm just going to be stunned.
Be absolutely irate.
Yeah, I'll be all right, but I'll just be flummoxed as to how anyone could be in charge of a central bank and think this is a smart decision.
Yeah, but even more so than last time?
Oh, look, I think last time it just shows how timid and kind of behind the ball they all are. And they have been, I think, for a long time. Everyone, these figures were not a shock. The Reserve Bank itself predicted everyone kind of knew this is where it's going to land. And yet last time they were like, oh, we better wait for these figures to change. It's like, wait, yeah. So, I think they're just very timid, very beholden to their belief that unemployment needs to rise because we're worried about wages. Just look out the window. Go talk to people in Woolies or Coles. You're not going to find people thinking...
Or look at your own figures.
Yeah. So hopefully, and certainly most of the market now, again, expects a cut in 2 weeks.
Well, someone else had something to say about inflation. The Shadow Treasurer, Ted O'Brien, said in Parliament on Monday that he told the Treasurer that inflation remains too high.
Under Labor, there has been 12 interest rate increases. Inflation remains too high.
Yeah, poor Ted. He's quite happy with himself getting the role of Shadow Treasurer.
Yeah, it's a big job.
You see him in Parliament. I mean, I'm not the first person to note that he does look very much like Scott Morrison. sort of mini Scott Morrison, and unfortunately they have a very similar tendency to appear rather pleased with themselves, shall we say.
Did he say why he thought inflation was too high, or just it just is?
Generally. I mean, what the opposition are doing at the moment is, and it's a smart thing, is that they are referring to the increases in prices since the government took power back in June, or the June quarter of 2022.
Yeah.
And the reason they're doing that is because all the big price rises happened sort of in the year 18 months after June 2022, and now things have flattened out. As we say, 2.1%. In fact, they're not growing fast at all. So if you're the opposition, you're focusing on that, well, you got nothing to say. So what they're doing is saying, it's, prices have gone up far too much under your government. It's the argument that they're doing was good for an election campaign, but it's not so good now that we're at a point where in 3 years' time, people, especially if inflation stays like this, people are not going to be concerned about cost of living in the same way we were 18 months ago. And again, Ted O'Brien, when these inflation figures came out, sort of made the point, prices aren't going down. It's like,
well, that's
they don't go down.
Just to be clear, as an economist, maybe clear up this sort of assumption.
Yeah, I mean, and I think most people know, apart from things like, say, petrol prices where they do bounce up and down, most things like bread, milk, things like dishwashing liquid and main
just
products.
Your everyday things.
Most of them, the prices do only go up.
Yeah.
And what we're concerned about is how fast they're going up. We don't want them going up faster than wages, for example.
But once they've gone up.
Once they've gone up, they generally don't come down. And I'm not talking about specials and things like that. If prices on average start falling and we have what's called deflation, that's a really bad situation. I mean, that's sort of depression, bad recession kind of situation, because what that means is it's better off for you not to buy something now and to wait until next week, next month, because the prices will be cheaper. And it's like, so that effectively means you shouldn't go shopping. You shouldn't go buying. People don't shop. So everyone's like, business is really quiet.
Yeah.
And there's unemployment starts going up and everything. So, he's trying to make a political point of going, prices aren't going down. It's just they're not rising faster, which is true. But if you're going to say that, then what's your point? You think prices should be going down? And I think it's something that O'Brien needs to look. He's new to the job. He's coming off the back of his great success selling nuclear power to everybody. He's trying to make a name for himself, but I think at the moment he's got his trainer wheels on a bit and is making a few statements that sound great, and because he thinks, this will be what people feel or they think, I can say inflation remains too high, and people go, yeah, good point. But it's like, come on, you're the shadow treasurer. And when he said this on Monday, the inflation at that point was 2.4, which is still below the target midpoint. And then 3 days later, the figures came out and it was 2.1. It's come on, Ted, maybe
let's talk about wages
or
increasing,
something,
so increasing
or,
affordability.
Talk about real wages not growing, and don't throw in these lines as bit of asides that you think, they're really. They actually provide ammunition to Jim Chalmers to kind of say, really, mate, do you really know what you're talking about here?
Yeah, fair enough. You posted on the Australian Institute live blog this week that had some pretty interesting data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics that was surveying discouraged job seekers and asking them why aren't they looking for work. There are quite a few reasons, really, why people who aren't employed aren't actually looking for a job. And, contrary to what I'm sure a lot of people believe, it's not just because they are dole bludgers or whatever term
I'm sure
you might.
Not many of our listeners think that.
I would hope not, no.
I seriously hope.
I'm a lady in her 50s. I am finding it very difficult to get employment. No one wants to employ me, unfortunately, at my age.
There was no doubt in my mind there was definitely an ageism situation of not getting a job. You could just tell by some of the questions that were asked. Do you think you'll be right with embracing this technology?
People with disability face significant hurdles finding employment.
People with disability are more likely to be unemployed.
The cost then of early education is weighed up against the lower income earner, which is often the mum, the woman, and she then has to justify her wage against the cost of childcare or early education.
Honestly, it's as much as our mortgage payment. It doubles what we pay for that.
Presenting pretty serious barriers to letting women access paid work opportunities and work to their full potential in the way they wanted to.
If you target childcare and make it more affordable, you're going to help economic growth and help productivity.
Yeah, it's something as we know, every month we get the unemployment figures and we know how many people are not in the labour force. And to be in the labour force, you either have to have a job or you're actively looking for work. Because if you're not actively looking for work, you're not classed as unemployed. So what the Bureau of Stats does each year is ask people who aren't looking for work, why aren't you looking for work?
Yeah.
There's kind of three reasons.
Yeah.
One is the discouraged work, and that's kind of the one we really often focus on. The people who feel like there's just no hope.
Yeah,
so
I want to work, but it's not going to happen. Yeah.
It's not going to happen. I can't, I'm just, and that's certainly a concern there. Then the other category is what we call sort of family reasons. Big one there, taking care of children, taking care of parents, retired elderly parents who maybe need care. And then the other type is you're kind of quite happy.
You're just happy not to work.
And the big reason for that is you're at school or you're at uni or TAFE or whatever, and you're not looking for work because you're studying. You're at school, and a big chunk of the what we call people outside the workforce are people who are young people who are studying. That's the big one. The great thing about these figures is they split them by gender, which is really interesting because when we do that, we see the overarching main reason men are not looking for work, and about a third, 36% of men said they're not looking for work because they're studying.
Yeah.
They're at school or they're at uni. That was not the number one reason why women were not looking for work.
I would guess that it might be because of childcare.
Childcare. 30% of women said childcare, whereas only 20% said education.
What's the percentage of men who
said childcare? 3.
So 3 versus what, 30? That's pretty
Now, one of the really interesting things, though, about the figures, and we can, another one is about 2.5% of men and women said they were discouraged because they felt they were considered too old or too young. Around 1.5% to 2% said they lacked the necessary skills, so they weren't bothering. Good thing is only about 1.5% said they were discouraged because there weren't any jobs in the area. So that's a good sort of, and again, about 1 to 1.5% were saying there just aren't any jobs that are suitable for their hours, the hours that they need. You have some people with illnesses, and that's why they didn't. And, it's quite significant. We'll say 9% of men and about 6.5% of women saying they weren't looking for work because of their own long-term health or disability concerns. And then you got about 12% of men and 7% of women who just said had no need or want to work. No. And you might think, and it's like, no, they're retired.
Yeah, okay.
That's basically the main, because you can dig down and look at the age bracket, and it is the over 55s who are very much taking up the majority of that category. So, so that's the kind of things we're looking at. And the reason why these are important is because, we don't want people to be discouraged from working. We want people to feel that, one, they've got the skills to work, that the jobs are there, and also if they want to work, but have kids, that there is the childcare available, and that they can afford it,
and flexible work options.
And that was the interesting thing with the figures, is because the ABS have been doing these since 2015, so we've got a good decade now of data. And what we can see over that time is that childcare actually has dropped as the reason why people aren't working. And the main reason for that is the cost of childcare is less of an issue now than it was 10 years ago.
Okay.
Which is, it's
something.
Less of an issue, but countering that slightly, and certainly in the past year there was a bit of an increase in the percent of people who claim or put down childcare as the reason why they're not working, but it's not because they can't afford childcare or there aren't any childcare places, is that they actually just want to stay home and take care of their kids.
No, look, if that's what they want.
Each to their own.
Yeah.
So that's when economists see that, look, they're not the people that they're really concerned about and think is a loss to the labour force, because that's just choice. What we really want to do is those people who would like to work but can't because they can't afford childcare, because one, individually, that's a big loss for those people. And when I say people, basically women.
Yeah. Loss of career progression.
Loss
superannuation.
of career, all of that. And also just in terms of the economy, loss of output, basically. These are women who could be working and could be generating income and tax and all the other things that go with it. So that's why there's always a big focus on childcare, and certainly, the last 15 years, pretty much, especially since kind of the Rudd government came into power in 2007, childcare has been a constant issue. There's been, every now and then we get a new subsidy that boosts and things, and while it might feel like it is still an incredible punish, and it is, these figures do suggest that it is less of a concern. It's still essentially the major concern for people who claim childcare as their reason for not working. The cost and availability is still the main reasons why they're saying that, but it has definitely fallen since 2015. So that's a good thing, but it also is, when you look at the figures, it makes it very clear that still is the big reason. So if we kind of sit back and go, we don't have to worry about it, it'll start rising again, and we'll be back to where we were in 2015, where it becomes a much bigger reason for people not working.
Yeah, I mean, and considering how, we talked recently about how much strife the childcare sector is in at the moment, it's really not something we should just assume is getting better at all.
Yeah, and, I think you make a good point there, where it wouldn't be surprising if there's going to be an increase in people going, actually, I've chosen to take care of my children because I'm suddenly feeling really worried about childcare.
Yep.
And so as our colleague Matt Grudenoff has, as I should say, co-host of the program, Matt Grudenoff has noted, one of the problems is if we keep leaving it up to the market and thinking, the market's going to provide this great incentive to produce great childcare, we're going to be in trouble, because your 4-year-old is not going to be able to come home and tell you, they did this thing really efficiently and productively, and actually I thought the oversight was pretty good and it was value for money, Dad.
When the consumer of the product doesn't really have a voice with which to...
Exactly. So we very much are of the case that, public services should be undertaken by the public sector. If you leave it to the private sector, you might as well set the date for the Royal Commission. And so it will be interesting to see next year if there is a bit of a change.
And we've probably just got time for a very quick Tariff Corner. I've heard that there are some updates, but it seems very thought bubble-ish from Donald Trump's part at the moment.
Yeah, look, he's been over in Europe, in Scotland, cheating at golf and
terrorising
people. opening his own golf course, as you do when you're president of the United States. Look, he's done he did a deal with the EU, which, again, as often happens with Trump, he announces this deal, says what's in it, and then, or the European Commission said what they had agreed to, and then the statement goes up on the White House website, and everyone's looking, going, "This wasn't what was said." This is including a few things that weren't in the press conference. So, but the upshot is that they're getting a 15% tariff on most things, rather than the 30% that he was threatening. It's still 15%, which is up from 0. So American consumers are still going to be worse off. But the big factor for Australians is that currently we're at 10%, because that was kind of the baseline for all countries, including those with penguins and
and no people.
The problem is now 15% might be the baseline, and so he's very much still wants to come after our pharmaceutical PBS, Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme, which the government this week announced new legislation that's going to lower the top cost of scripts under the PBS to, I think it's $25. And, pharmaceutical companies hate that. Donald Trump thinks the plan is, if he can get higher drug prices in everywhere else except for America, then pharmaceutical companies will go, okay, now we'll lower prices a little bit in America because our profits are still good. That's basically what he's trying to do. And the government here will kindly tell him to get stuffed. There's no way they're going to touch the PBS. But as a result of that, maybe we're looking at a 15%, maybe 20%. It's very unclear what he thinks is the base, because it's Donald Trump and he makes it up as he goes.
Well, I think when he announced it, well, if you can call it an announcement, wasn't he saying like, it'll be 15 or 20 or something along there, one of those two?
I mean, this is, as listeners will recall from last week's with the lovely edit that we had in there, this is a man who was claiming that he was going to drop drug prices in America by 1,000%. So figures are not his big point. But the worry is that we're going to get higher tariffs. But as I say, always remember, that doesn't mean we're paying more prices. It means Americans are paying more prices for Australian goods. Not great news for us, for our producers who export to America, but given he's doing it for every country, it's really more about hurting Americans than hurting everyone else.
All right, well, that's probably all we've got time for today, Greg. Thanks so much.
I think we should end it there. That is a happy note. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We'll have to leave it there. This episode of Dollars and Cents was recorded, would you believe it, the 31st of July.
Oh, gosh.
Which means next time we're coming back on August. And some things may have changed. My column, which has stonks of graphs on the inflation figures, so if you really want to impress all of your friends with how much you know about CPI, go to the Guardian Australia site and read my column, and you will be able to impress everybody. For more information, actually more graphs as well on inflation and every other matter, go to our website, which is australiainstitute.org.au. And also, because Parliament's sitting, and whenever we do have Parliament sitting, we'll have Amy Ramikis' live blog going, and there is masses of information there. She's got all the inside goss, all the word, and all of our researchers are just sending heaps of stuff her way, so it's a great read. As always, our music is by Blue Dot Sessions. Everyone, have a great week. We will see you all, and hopefully me without a throat lurgy, next week.
See ya.